Where do great video game ideas come from? Well, when a mummy video game and a daddy video game love each other very much. Actually, no, that's a story for another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive and reverse engineering one of the greatest games of all time, Katamari Damacy, and asking another very important question: what the hell? First launched way back in 2004, Katamari Damacy has you playing as a 5 cm tall prince who is challenged by his father, the king of the cosmos, to push around a big magic sticky ball to pick up everyday objects on Earth, thereby making new stars which will beautify the nighttime sky. In an era of sensible sequels, better graphics, and relatable heroes, Katamari was a breath of fresh air, not to mention delightfully weird in a very Japanese kind of way. How was Katamari designed? Well, I wasn't there, so I don't know the exact workflow, but I'm pretty sure the path went something like this. Some real-world inspiration sparked the prototyping of a core game mechanic, which in turn enabled a thematic direction, which then inspired the aesthetic visual treatment, all the while underpinned by a strong vision with clear design pillars. Okay, what? Okay, first things first, the game's creator, Keita Takahashi, had 4 design pillars to guide the design: novelty, ease of understanding, enjoyment, and humor. Design pillars gave the team a system for making decisions on what to include in the game. For example, humorous but complex, no. Innovative but not really joyful, no. As Albert Einstein once said, if you don't know where you are going, you don't know when you've arrived. Takahashi also wanted the game to be a juxtaposition of opposites. He wanted his game to be both silly and serious, both practical and whimsical. Having a vision such as this would have pushed the team to think beyond standard practices of the day, I reckon. And as a result, we ended up with this guy, possibly the greatest father figure role model in the history of video gaming. Okay, clear vision, check. Now let's get to the core game mechanic of Katamari, which involves using a twin stick mech tank controls to push around a sticky ball and gather up household items like a rampaging Walmart shopper at 3 AM during a Black Friday sale. The cool thing about this game mechanic is that it was actually inspired by a real-world game played in Japan called Tamagotchi, where school students push around large balls to win races and achieve fame and glory among their peers. Inspiration from the real world is commonplace in video game design. For example, we've seen lots of combat games inspired by world wars or historical battles. We've seen Pikmin inspired by Miyamoto's garden, Farming Simulator inspired by, well, tractors and cornfields, I guess. LA Noire inspired by old movies, and even Goat Simulator, I'm guessing, was inspired by watching a bunch of Australian backpackers trying to make their way back to the hostel after a big night out on the town.
What happened, mate?
Pardon?
What's going on?
I'm just waiting for a mate.
So Katamari had its real-world inspiration, kids rolling big balls. The next step would be prototyping the gameplay to figure out exactly what does the player do. Nowadays, any old rando can fire up Unity or Unreal or Godot and grab a bunch of game assets from an asset store and get busy cranking out a playable prototype. But back in the early 2000s, things weren't so easy. Takahashi didn't have much luck convincing the Namco bigwigs up on level 34 to listen to his game ideas, so he had to get scrappy. He cobbled together a handful of 3D art students and some recently laid off programmers and set about prototyping the core game. We know that they got the ball rolling by starting with the ball rolling, and we also know that Takahashi liked the idea of having the ball grow over time so that the player had a sense of progression. It's possible they started with something similar to the real-world inspiration, perhaps having the player push the ball quickly through an obstacle course similar to the kids they saw in the playground. I'm pretty sure the team would have had 3 main goals at this stage of prototyping. First, to find a movement system that felt good just pushing the ball around the world. Second, to find the purpose for the player. That is, what are we trying to do to win the game? And third, what is the challenge in the game? Who's the enemy, or what is happening to prevent us from winning and achieving our goals? And then one day, possibly while in the shower or sitting on the can, someone on the team would have had the thought, instead of having the ball grow a little bit at a time as you pick up objects, what if the ball grows in stages? Each time you level up your ball, you can now pick up a bigger category of objects. If that is actually what happens, it's what I would call a light bulb moment. And this light bulb moment would no doubt have unlocked a whole new wave of prototyping, creativity, and experimentation. In my experience, most game teams have dozens of light bulb moments throughout the game's development, but only a handful of those light bulb moments turn out to be the right thing for the final game itself. It might take maybe 10 ideas to find the one that works best, but you keep plowing through those ideas. Clearly, this stepped leveling up of the ball was a winner. Not only did it give the player feedback on what they could or couldn't pick up, it also provided tangible milestones to aim for. It also meant that the environment designers could do things like calculate the number of size 1 objects needed to grow to size 2, and then size 2 objects to grow to size 3, and so on. It meant that the team could use each size category of objects as paths, obstacles, and general level design elements, knowing that the player would either pick them up or bump into them depending upon what size the ball currently was at. And then upon leveling up the ball, the player would have a whole new level layout to navigate despite still being in the exact same location. In a way, it was Inception before Inception was a thing. That is, levels within levels. Genius, huh? As an extra bonus, this stepped sizing up meant the player could have a moment of pause from the manic gameplay, which incidentally is a very clever way to allow multiple people to play together by taking turns each time you're leveling up. That might not have been the intention with the pausing gameplay, but it certainly makes the game much more of a party game than if it wasn't the case. Bit of trivia for you, the literal translation of Katamari is clump and Damacy is spirit, so it makes you wonder how many more copies would the sequel have sold if they called their game We Love Clump Spirit. So far we've been talking about the what of the core game mechanic. What is the player doing? Now we need to talk about the how. How do you move? How do you pick things up? How do you lose items? How do you fail the level? And so on. The game team would have tried many variations of the control scheme, of the physics, of the collisions, etc., constantly asking the question, does this feel good? Do we like it? Do players like it? If you've played the game, you'll know that the controls are twin stick like tank or mech controls, where the left stick moves the left tank treads and the right stick moves the right tank treads. The ball operates with the same dynamics, one stick forward, one stick back to rotate, both sticks forward to go forward, both back to go back. The main difference to a tank game is when you go left or right with both the sticks, you'll strafe to the left or the right. Now you might be thinking, why bother with tank controls? This is a ball, not a tank. Why not just use regular FPS style movement controls, left stick to move, right stick to look, or even simpler, use car driving controls, that is left stick to steer and the triggers for acceleration and braking. Well, my theory is that the easier they made the controls, the less joyful the game became, because we no longer had the fun accidents, the fumbles, the near misses. Twin stick controls tend to produce crude movements and take higher skill for precision, especially when controlling a round ball with old ladies or monster trucks stuck to the side while flying down the side of a hill. And remember a few minutes ago when I was banging on about vision and design pillars and all that whatnot? Well, this is where the team would have used those design pillars to make the decisions on controls. Novelty, yes, sort of, it's not what you'd first expect. Ease of understanding. Well, yes, once you're told that it drives kind of like a tank, it's pretty clear. Enjoyment, well, I personally think so. And humor. Well, as I've mentioned, I also personally think it's funny to see someone try 7 times to pick up a thumbtack and then go flying off when a random cat slams into them. So I think tick in the box for all 4 of those design pillars. Easy to learn, difficult to master. That's the game designer's holy grail. As Confucius once said, video games with an obvious learning curve allow players to feel good about themselves by gaining mastery over the game's controls. Next, let's talk about the thematic and aesthetic direction for the game. Thematic being the who and where, and aesthetic being the art style or the look of the game. At some point, no doubt, someone on the team would have had another light bulb moment and said, why not make the player a tiny prince cleaning up after his father who destroyed the universe during a drunken bender. Oh, and the king should have a weird gigantic headpiece. Oh, and be quite flamboyant. Oh, and act as though he kind of doesn't even care what the prince is up to, you know, like a bad parent. That'd be funny. Actually, at the risk of ruining my carefully crafted narrative for this video, I think they already had the weird, crazy, awesome characters thought up and maybe even concepted or created, and they thought, hey, why not use those ones in this particular game? So if we have these spectacularly magnificent main characters, then why are the assets in the game so simple? There are a few reasons for this. First, it helps the player relate to the items as day-to-day things they recognize in their own life. They're somewhat bland, they're somewhat normal, they're somewhat simple. If we're gathering up futuristic robots or dystopian steampunk factories, it wouldn't have the same feeling of absurdity that we get by collecting regular kitchen crockery, or toys, or furniture, or animals, buildings, clouds, vehicles, etc. Even though the items are very simple and ordinary, they're also very stylized and often weird in their execution. When considering all of the items in their entirety, you can see Takahashi's vision for creating things that are both silly and serious. The second reason for the simple objects is more technical and practical, but still kind of awesome. In most cases, an empty world is a boring world. I think we can agree on that. But if you wanted to jam a bunch of stuff in your game levels back in the PS2 days, you couldn't also have that stuff be highly detailed. Katamari uses a low poly art style, meaning that assets have a low number of polygons and use simple textures. The PS2 could handle about 500,000 polygons at 30 frames per second, which means that when you want to have zillions of items in your world, shaving a couple of polys off your comical rat carrying a Lego block was cause for much celebration, and of course some mandatory chest bumping. The object art style is technically simple, but I think it's still really quirky and really unique. A bit like Minecraft wouldn't be Minecraft if it didn't look Minecraft. Katamari probably wouldn't be as special as it is if the objects were more detailed. So once the team had its core game, its story, its art style, the rest of the features really didn't need much innovation. Level design would have been straightforward, cutscenes were created to help give flavor to the story, player progression was pretty much mapped out already, that is, start off really small and eventually be big enough to grab everything. A metagame style menu system was added for selecting levels and showing the game progress. Similarly, a scoring system highlighting the size of your Katamari was implemented for each level to give the game additional replayability, I believe. Mostly standard stuff that players would expect from a game. And then in one last blast of creative genius, someone issued the order to create a soundtrack that, to a non-Japanese speaker, sounds like a unicorn ate a bag of crushed diamonds and pooped out a cotton candy flavored rainbow. Nah. It was magical. So that's a quick dive into the world of Katamari. If you've got a game that you would like us to analyze next and deep dive into, please let us know in the comments below. That's all for now. Look forward to seeing you again soon.